You know that kid, the one that runs around the school, provokes his teachers, disrupts the entire class, the one who enjoys driving you crazy. The one you spend multiple hours creating token boards, first and then boards, visual schedules, break cards. You put everything into place and then nothing changes. That kid. If this is the case, you may be dealing with a child diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. Many teachers, principals, and even behavior analysts don't realize ODD kids require a completely different competency. You see, ODD kids can tell you the rules. They can tell you what they're supposed to do. They can even tell you what they're not supposed to do. But that doesn't mean they can do it. My Aunt Betty can tell me how to drive, but she definitely can't navigate through a busy highway. The problem is, ODD kids have not learned to navigate to get reinforcement through appropriate social interaction. And what's reinforcing to them is not at all what people expect. These kids are after a specific kind of attention. Conflict. But because of their learning history, specifically their experiences with punishment and reinforcement, conflict has become appetitive to them, to the point where no other reinforcers can compete with it. Also, these kids are watching adults at all times. They are looking to see what's controlling the adults' behaviors. Yep, you heard me. They're analyzing our behavior. And if there's any change in the environment, it's a signal to them that there's an opportunity for them to engage in conflict. They will do it. And because conflict's the reinforcer, and most adults don't realize it, these kids have a long history of reinforcement. And they have a behavior pattern that's almost impossible to break. So the pattern of behavior of the ODD kid goes something like this. The adult gives a demand. The child displays the opposite action. This results in a conflict. Or the adult provides corrective feedback. The child responds by displaying the opposite action, and this results in conflict. Or the adult imposes a consequence. The child does the opposite action, and this results in conflict, along with a whole lot of emotional responding. And what if an adult tries to talk to the child or reason with him? Can you guess what might happen? Yep, you guessed it. Conflict. And try to give one of these kids praise and see what happens. They'll respond by showing you just how bad they really are. Do you see the dilemma here? So what do adults do with a child like this? How do they go about changing this maladaptive pattern of behavior when iPads, recess, tangibles, break cards, and even praise have very little or no reinforcer value to them? And when every contingency adults put in place results in a conflict? Well, we've all been taught antecedent behavior consequence, right? The basic learning principles. Well, let's look at this through a different lens. So what are the antecedents that trigger the maladaptive behaviors? Let's see. Placing demands, giving corrective feedback, imposing a consequence, just about anything. And what is the behavior? Displaying the opposite action to engage in a conflict, which includes a long list of high magnitude problem behaviors. And what is the consequence? Successfully engaging the adult in a conflict. Folks, don't get confused here. When these kids escape demands by arguing, tantruming, displaying physical aggression, or running away, They are not trying to escape anything. They are trying to engage the adult in a conflict. Escaping non-preferred tasks is not the function here. Giving them easier tasks or break cards is not going to fix this. Remember, these kids are caught in a maladaptive behavior pattern. So the dilemma here, folks, is that every time these kids are told what to do, they don't do it. And then they act out, which results in the adult either changing the contingencies or removing them altogether. And it doesn't even matter what you tell them to do. You can tell them to do something they want to do. It's just the fact that you tell them, and it's a demand. Do you remember when I said earlier that these kids don't know how to navigate to get the reinforcers through socially appropriate behaviors? What I meant by this is that these kids have not learned to show socially appropriate interaction because environmental conditions surrounding their learning history has altered the value of conflict as a reinforcer, and actually lowered, the value of typical reinforcers, including positive attention. And they have their own rule-governed contingencies they are operating. They are the analysts. Why? Because think about it. Here's an example from a classroom perspective. Antecedent: child throws a massive tantrum. Behavior: teacher changes or removes the consequences. Consequence: teacher escapes child's massive tantrum. So the teacher escapes the punishing effect of the problem behavior. So how do we help these kids change from a maladaptive behavior pattern to an adaptive one? Well, I knew a really seasoned analyst that summed it up with an analogy. She would often come out of sessions with kids like this and say, even if everybody did the wrong thing, the kid gets better. Let me repeat that. Even if everybody did the wrong thing, the kid gets better. What she meant was, with kids diagnosed with ODD, what matters most is not what contingencies you put in place, but the consistency of contingencies. So let me give you an example of how the contingencies, the consequences, need to change here to break this behavior pattern. Here we go. The scenario. In a classroom setting, antecedent: child is given a demand. Take out your reading book. Behavior: child responds by trashing the room, hitting the teacher, screaming profanity, breaking an iPad, and running out of the room. Adjusted consequence: the teacher responds by not even acknowledging these behaviors happened at all, not even the broken iPad. That can be dealt with later. The child is just simply escorted back to the room with a calm demeanor, and the child is denied all attention and reinforcers until he or she follows the demand. When the child follows the demand, i.e. reads the book, the child earns the reinforcer that currently has little value to them, but will have more value as they engage with it more. Folks, this consequence has to consistently happen when a child attempts to engage adults in conflict, within every setting, across all people, and for a long enough period of time to break the behavior pattern. The tenacity necessary will require extra energy and effort on the part of the adult to refrain from emotionally reacting to the behaviors, but there is no better feeling than altering the lifelong learning for these kids. Once you've won over a child with ODD, the skills generalize across settings and situations rapidly. It is a wonderful process and worth the effort.